It is your post match on a Tuesday night, late into a Tuesday night. It's around 10:30 when we started to record to this. It's me, it's Warren, and we're talking post match. Everton won, Southampton won with that little asterisk next to the name, which means they've qualified for the next round of the Carabao Cup on penalties. As we normally do before we get to what we're going to give our opinions for, obviously, we try and ask as many as we can what their views are on this game. And Warren, I put it instantly on after Southampton had scored that last penalty. Oh, sorry, after after Ashley Young quite hilariously missed his penalty, which you really couldn't write that in a funny novel, could you? Although you would do because it'd be hilarious if you did. But where people are saying now, you've got to get rid of Sean Dyche. Um, there are various times this goes to a knee-jerk reaction. I'm not saying that that's what people are going for here, but we've just gone and lost two games when we were 2-0 up. The one against Bournemouth was unfathomable at the time. The one against Leicester, against Villa, the Leicester ones to come at the weekend. the one against Villa there on at the weekend then was agonising because we actually played well and managed to get to 2-0 in front. But before we go to the instant reaction of the game itself, the performance and how he generally, played in that game, you Sean Dyche out straight away now? From what you've seen at the start of this season, are you seeing him getting this any better?
I reached that point, I think, on Saturday, the Villa game, where I was starting to lean more towards that way of thinking, definitely. And, watching again tonight, and it was just so uninspiring tonight. And I just think it just seems to be catalogue of mistakes after catalogue of mistakes. I know we're going to talk specifically about the game tonight, but when I talk about the mistakes, I'm talking about, I know they've hardly had time to settle in, the new lads, but the recruitment just doesn't look strong enough already, does it? It doesn't look like we've addressed the areas we needed to, and that's not a criticism of the players who've come in, by the way. It's more a criticism of what's our plan? What are we thinking? This is a conversation, a much longer and deeper conversation for another time on another show. But we're having a winger fill in at left back tonight, and that sums it all up for me. So he's part of a big problem at the moment that's surrounding the football club, and I've tried to really reflect the last few days on what my true feelings are and what the best will be for the club going into the winter and into the spring and into the rest of this season. And I just think that, and a lot of the comments I've heard, which I agree with, is you brought this man in to stabilise things and to shore up, and make us be solid. And he's done that to a degree in the previous season and a half, but the stats against them now, what's that? Is that 5 in 30 games, is it now, or something like that?
5 in 27, yeah.
So we were approaching 5 in 30 games if it keeps going the way it is. And that's a very worrying stat. That's not just a 5 games into the season and we're a bit concerned because we haven't won yet. This is a concern, and all the things that you lads have said on previous shows about you bring this man in to do what he's famed for or what he's supposed to be good at. And if you conceding goals left, right and centre, if you can't defend corners, if you can't defend set pieces, and you're not offering much else in terms of, don't get me wrong, I'm not big on possession, I'm more big on results, but the results aren't coming, which makes the possession stats look even worse at the minute. So I'm leaning more towards that. I think Saturday's cataclysmic. It's going to be a massive game, more so for him, for Dyche than for the club, because I think the pressure really will start mounting now. It feels like to me after tonight as well, and seeing the response online, it feels a little bit, and I don't know if you agree with this, a bit like the way nearing the end of the Martinez era, where the fans had really turned at that point, and it became toxic, and it became aggressive, and it became personal. And Benitez had that as well to a degree, but I think that before it got to that point, Benitez was gone anyway. Same with Koeman, but I think a lot of people are really concerned and worried. And what doesn't help, Dave, is when you watch the game tonight, which was a dreadful game, by the way, absolutely
Yeah,
awful to watch.
yeah,
What doesn't help is when you're served up with that style of play and that way of playing and the way we set up. And that's the case every game. And it's like now as if teams have sussed what Everton are going to do, because there's no difference, there's no alternative. And do you know what I will say, a lot of that is to do with the fact that he hasn't had a lot at his disposal in terms of a deep squad, for instance, or he can't really freshen it up. And if he does freshen it up, he has to bring in youth, or he has to bring in untested and untried players. But when you know what you're going to see and you're going to expect from an Everton performance and what it's going to look like, and now, bridging into that we're conceding as well, it's just a very difficult time at the moment. Very difficult. And it's hard to see. I said this after the Chelsea game, 6-0, and we went and won 3 on the bounce. But it is very hard to see how this ends and how we get out of this absolute lull that we're in at the minute. I'm fearing for Saturday, and then the Palace game. If we don't get at least a point on Saturday, I mean, my God, that Palace game, that's just going to be horrendous, and a horrendous game to witness. So,
yeah.
In a long-winded way, I think it's getting to that point now, Dave, where it's becoming harder and harder to justify him being the manager. And that's not just, that you said earlier, it's not just a knee-jerk thing. That is a dating back to post-Christmas. Ironically, after we got knocked out of the Carabao last season, that's when the downfall, if you like, started.
Yeah.
And we've not really, barred the 3 or 4 games, and look, let's have it right, an excellent derby win and, an excellent couple of wins away from home and whatever. Barring them, it's a slump we've been in for a long time, and it's concerning, gravely concerning.
I think there's a lot to unpack with him there, and I referred to a couple of this after the Villa game. We mentioned it many times, that word stubbornness with him as well. But excuse me, I thought that he doesn't have, and I think we knew this when he came in, but he was needed for that particular situation where he puts fires out. That's what I see him as a manager. I don't see him as anybody who can do any better in their managerial career than what he did at Burnley and keeping them up for so many years, in which he did against all odds. By the way, that needs to be said. When he came in at Everton as well after Lampard, that sort of situation too, where he needed to keep Everton in the Premier League. Last season, keep Everton in the Premier League because of the points deductions. And I keep finding myself asking this question in my own head. I'm going that crazy about all this. Is what's next then, Sean? What have you got, Sean? What can you show us then, Sean? There's none of that there for me at all. It's just completely empty, and it looks desperate to me. And I know, obviously, tonight's massive controversy for many, but I'll say controversy, a lot of blame for tonight. That people had had enough was when he took off Beto for Ashley Young, and then it's Ashley Young who goes and misses the penalty to get us knocked out of the Carabao Cup. I'm not religious or believe in anything like this, but when you start looking at things where there's a bit of fate there, do you think it's Ashley Young that put us out and you're the one who's put him on for the striker there, Sean? What's going on? I am going that crazy. I do start talking to him and myself and me. Are you okay there, Sean? Do you know, like in my head? How's it going, Sean? What are you doing today, Sean? But like you say, I mean, there's no laughing matter. It's not like we haven't been here before either. I think that we've got to a stage where when we get new managers in or we want the current manager out, people will ultimately refer to it as a knee-jerk reaction. I think if you try your hardest to take away the context of what we previously had, if a manager starts a season like this and there's no confidence that looked like it's going to be in that side, that 2-0 start against Villa and the 70-odd minutes against Bournemouth, where we actually look like a decent side, a side that wants to attack, a side that wants to score goals, he seems to quite quickly have reverted to type, because it's almost like he's dipped his toe in the water of playing a bit of attacking football, stuff that football fans want to see, fans of Everton want to see that. But when it's been caught up on it, it's like, can't have that again, close the door, I'm not getting back out and looking like that at all. And then, lo and behold, going back to how he was has completely capitulated in itself as well. And I think that's when you get to a stage with a manager, similar to what you mentioned there about Martinez, which I think is a really appropriate point to make. When you get to a stage with managers are getting to the point where they don't know elsewhere to go. They don't know where they change this. They don't know how it gets any better. I've hit that with Sean Dyche. I won't go as far as saying this season because I initially didn't want him in as Everton manager anyway. Back when we first got him, I'm not just saying that to brag about it or anything because I don't personally didn't like him as a choice, but he came in and did what he needed to do. We were all very happy with what Sean Dyche did. All happy with how we finished the season with the points deduction and things like that. Then we had this massive discussion at the start of the season. Me and you, many of our others who are on the show talking about, does he get us to Bramley Moore? Does he get us to the end of the season? After those first couple of games, I was thinking, well, I said in my predictions this season, I couldn't see him getting us to Christmas, let alone to Bramley Moore. And that's a massive concern. I'm just saying that because I'd like to. I don't want to say that to be right. I'm up till somebody like to sit here and be wrong. I've always been renowned for over a decade that I'm really miserable when I talk about Everton, but I don't want to be right. No one wants to be right when they predict something that's negative about your club. Not at all. And now we're at a stage where we've had this so many other times. I can't remember when it's come this early in the season or what, and that's the difference here compared to say the last half dozen managers that we've got rid of, certainly since Mashiri's been in. That's happened later on in seasons. It's happened when we've got to a state where we can't go on with this. Koeman's the one that rings to mind for me, because that didn't seem like it was too deep into the season when we got rid of him. The first question people will go towards is who we got there to sack him. That's no excuse not to sack him, by the way. You can say, oh, it's fine. You couldn't sack him anyway if you wanted to, so let's stick with him. And then the other immediate go-to for people who don't want him to be sacked is, well, who do we go and get? Who do we go and get? And it ends up in Groundhog Day with all of that sort of things. This is where it's mentally difficult to sort of keep your focus on what's going on at this football club. What's the end of this now? We've got to get to Bramley Moore as a Premier League side. I think the ironic thing is, had we not had Sean Dyche as manager and we were in this situation, me and you'd be sitting here right now going, go and get Sean Dyche. And yes. Therein for me is a massive problem, because I do refer to that like, who do you go and get? It's the worst time, I think, where we've probably had to get rid of a manager, but we have no alternative in regards to somebody at the club who could make that decision. And we don't have a board, as far as we know, who could make the decision to actually sack the fella. So maybe going around the circle a little bit with that. But in regards to the game itself as well and the setup, do you know what it felt to me like? And I'm not sure if I put it on my Twitter or not. It felt to me like peak David Moyes when we played in the early stages of the League Cup competition, because the amount of seasons I used to be so angry that he wouldn't put a first 11 out in a Carabao game at home that gets you towards the last 32 straight away with the win, because it's the second round with it being the Premier League side. Everton win 2 more games. They're in the semi-final. Like when we did it last season, didn't we? With what happened against with Fulham. But for Sean Dyche, a manager who's under real pressure, to say the very least, going into this game, it's not like just now that we've all started having a problem with him. It's based on losing 2 games, really gone 2-0 up and getting battered at home first game of the season by Brighton. Goodison itself's an issue on its own, because it's how all of our last seasons there. There's an emotional attachment to that anyway. But in this today, I think you've missed a bit of a trick there, Sean, because by no means did Southampton throw their best 11 out. Southampton.
Do you think though that we had? Do you think we had a fully fit squad to select from? I'm not making excuses for the performance or what happened today.
That's an excellent rebuttal on that, because I feel you're right, and I feel, look, what's done my head in most is you look at that bench we've had there, and Irabunum straight away would be one of that first 11, wouldn't he? He'd be there. Who else am I thinking of? Is Tarkowski injured now, is he? Was he not on the bench?
Well, he wasn't named. He wasn't even on the bench.
Well, I've got the bench here,
So
so
this is what I mean. I mean, I don't know if there's instantly an illness going around the club. So
well,
I don't know if that's been a factor.
there's only Harrison, obviously Youngwood anyway, but Harrison, Young, and Irabunum there, obviously picked for two. So you say there's three there. Well, eliminate Young. There's two there that would be starting. I would imagine they'll start away at Leicester, or they did start against Villa. The rest of it, and I think this is where he'll be. I haven't seen his post match, and I'm glad we do this. I haven't had his pressure afterwards. I'm glad we do the post match before hearing what he said, really, because I think a couple of us will be throwing our computers, microphones at your wall or whatever. Some of the things he's been coming out with lately. But that lineup there, a couple of sort of semi-light debuts. Mangala, who come on against Villa, he's there. Decore's back in and captained the side. Ndayu, I think's been
O'Brien's first start, wasn't he?
Yeah, him and Irabunum have been two who've been the shining lights for me so far from what we've seen. And obviously O'Brien getting his first game as well. So Southampton would not fancy coming to Goodison, or shouldn't have fancied coming to Goodison Park from, well, all the way down where you live near there. It's not that far away from you down there, is it?
No, half an hour or so away. Yeah.
It
felt like to me, Dave.
You as an Everton fan, though. You as an Everton fan, would you fancy coming up here on Tuesday night and having to go back down there?
Not the way I'm feeling at the minute, anyway. With
Well,
this
no,
lady,
I know
what you're trying to. I know what you're trying to say. Yeah. You no, if you're a Tuesday night away in the middle of the week when you've got to go 3.5, 4 hours away. No, and I think as well. I was going to make the point. It felt to me from the outset like it was two teams who weren't that bothered. Of course, they were bothered, but you know what I mean. They probably didn't mind too much if they went out tonight, and there's probably more at stake for us because of the whole situation with the start of our season. I know Southampton have made a similar start, but they've just come up from the Championship, so there's no talk around Russell Martin, for instance, for their manager because of where they've come from. It's a different story with Everton, but it felt very much like to me that it was two teams who weren't necessarily bothered if they got knocked out. And I don't mean they didn't care or they didn't want to win. I just mean that when you look at the grand scheme of things in what the season's probably going to look like for both clubs, the Carabao Cup in midweek is going to be a distraction. And we referenced earlier, it led to probably the start of our slump last year, getting knocked out of it. And it was a game probably we didn't want. And at that time, I don't know if you remember, it was coming up to Christmas. And we had a lot of injuries as well. We had a lot of players out that time over an important period. So it had that impression for me. And I think though when you play in a cup game, and there's a chance, like you said earlier, to go through, and someone made the point, I just read it there, someone made the point that could be the last ever cup game at Goodison. I mean, what a way to bow out, if it is. But you'd expect a little bit of something.
Do you have that as an Everton fan, feeling like there's a bit of pressure there that's obviously unwarranted, or it's unable to avoid that everything's the last Everton for you? Every game's the last Everton for you when you go there as a fan. That's the last time we're playing this. That's the last time.
But yeah. There is, of course, there's a pressure, but Dave, it's the way it's being handled and the way the feeling I've got coming out of certainly the coaching side of the team is one of the first things he said before the ball had been kicked was, because it's our last season at Goodison, it's this wonderful stadium. Fans are expecting me to finish in the top half. Like, we're a million miles away from that. And that, for me, just straight away put a downer on it and a negative. And I think this is part of the problem as well, where people are very quick now to be like, I've had enough. Because if you remember, even under Lampard, I mean, a lot of people were very grateful for what Lampard did. And even when he was going under that mad run, there was a lot of people who were still going, yeah, but last season, and he did well for us, and he's brought the club and the fan base together. For me, Sean Dyche hasn't attempted to do anything like that. His rhetoric in recent post-match, in terms of his comments and his press conferences before games and previewing games, it's been not one of him taking responsibility. It's been a little bit of, woe is me because I've got this squad and people don't know what's going on behind the scenes. The comments about Goodison was just for me, like, what a way to kick everyone down, in the dumps where it's our final season. Listen, I agree in the sense of we're not going to go from where we went last season. I'm talking now about pre-season predictions now. I don't think any of us really thought we were going to do anything particularly special building on last season. But I think a lot of us thought, you know what, we'll be in for a solid season and we'll have a bit of a bounce at Goodison because it is the last season. But all the messages I've got from the players, the club, the manager, has been about how just let's temper this. Let's devalue this great thing we've got rather than embrace it. If I was a player in that dressing room, I'd be embracing the fact that a ground with so much history, so many great players down the years, so many great games that have been played there, both in our last 30 years or so, Dave, and before we were born. I'm thinking of like the 80s, I'm thinking of the 60s, I'm thinking Dixie Dean scoring 60 goals and all that, and without getting too sort of nostalgic and whatever here and sentimental. If I was a player now for Everton, I'd be embracing the fact that I'm playing the final season, and I'm privileged and I'm lucky to be able to be a part of such a historic season. And when he came out with that comment of people expect us to be top half just because we're in a wonderful stadium, that for me, that just I think that just says volumes about the way we set up and the way we view things. And it might only be a little comment and it might only be a little thing, but look what it's done. It's created this pressure now where every time we play at home, we're worried about conceding, we're worried about the crowd being on our back. The conversations are turning again to, are the fans too critical of the players? Well, I'm sorry, but forgive me if I'm a bit critical because I've had 30 years of this now. This isn't just a 1 year thing. Yeah. This is 30 years of being let down, of failure, of grand, what's the word? Like not misconduct, but when just grand mishandling of a fantastic football club, and yet we're the issue, we're the problem. And I don't think he directly said it was the fans, but embrace it. The mentality of it for me, that when he came out with that comment, I think summed up the mentality of him as a manager. And you can go the other way and be like what Lampard was, where it's probably, or Martinez, where it's probably too positive. But I just think you can get little wins as a manager. You can get the fans on side, and I think he probably would have had a bit more sympathy if he was a bit more that way. But the recent sort of blaming of different things and not taking a collective responsibility, I think to a fan base like us, that doesn't sit well. You want to see, we always talk about the hard work and the graft and everything else that comes with what we expect to see as a fan. But take responsibility when, own up to it. And I think you get a lot of, all right, okay, you got it wrong there, but at least you took responsibility for it. And I just think the way he's gone about things has not probably gone down well either. And in terms of tonight, I mean, going back to tonight, I actually thought in spells we did fairly well again. I thought the first 15 minutes we were decent. We started passing it around a bit and playing some half decent football. I thought there was parts in the second half as well where I thought we did really well, and we showed a bit of creativity at times and a bit of workmanlike effort, and it got us forward and it got us into high positions in the pitch. But again, it was too few and far between. And you just think we're in this slump now that it's just affecting the crowd. I mean, the crowd tonight didn't sound great, and that's not me criticising the fans, by the way. I think that's born out of frustration of how the start of the season's gone, and I think it's also there's a bit of an inevitability there, isn't there? We knew what was going to happen again. As you started off the show with it, if you'd have wrote that Ashley Young takes the last penalty and misses it, I mean, it sounds cliche to say, but the script writers would have threw you out because it was too unbelievable. But it's happened again to us. But listen, I always try to look for positive. Me, Dave. In terms of the positives tonight, I thought Roman Dixon was excellent again down the right hand side. I thought he was. people will say it's only Southampton or it was their second 11. We can't control who they play, and who we get drawn against. We can only control.
Finding a way at Spurs as well, though, wasn't he? He was finding a way at
Yeah,
Spurs.
no, yeah, and I think especially after watching what the right-hand side of our defence has done in recent games, where a lot of our issues, conceding goals, has come from that part of the pitch. I don't see why that lad can't continue. I thought he was brilliant tonight. I thought the young lad Armstrong had a decent game as well. I thought he was okay. Got a good ovation when he went off, but I thought he looked composed. I didn't think he looked out of place, or certainly didn't look overawed by the occasion, making his first start in the middle of that midfield. I actually thought Michael Keane had a good game tonight. I've been a big critic of him, especially after the game at the weekend. But I actually thought he did well tonight, and I thought he showed actually a lot of bottle to take that first penalty, considering all the noise that's been around him. Again, some may listen to that and think, well, he's playing at his level. He's playing against the team that's just come up against the Championship. Again, you can't control that. All he can do is have a good game on the night, and I thought he did. I thought the goal that we scored was what Everton should be about, where they kept the ball alive from a corner. They fought for it, and they got a goal out of it. But again, Dave, it's sadly coming back to a negative. The goal we conceded, I mean, we've got to be stronger than that. We've got to be. We can't be letting players come off yet that easily and having a free header at the back post from a set piece. It's not a great look, and I just think it just seems like confidence is shot. I think the only hope in terms of improving that side of the game is going to be when Branthwaite comes back, because you can just sense there's a panic in that back four at the minute. And if you concede like that and we don't really score that many either, then you're on a recipe for disaster, aren't you?
What does it tell you when you're relying upon a 22-year-old lad to come back and save us? That says a big part of the story, doesn't it? When you need to go and do that with Branthwaite. Just two of the points you made there that I just want to pick up on. Excuse me, was what you were saying about Dyche himself and what he's come out with. Very stereotyped towards a manager that's under pressure. The kind of manager that you see coming to the end of his tether, either walking out or getting sacked. You hear that? I think it's a very common tone that he takes towards it. But I thought he was a lot more savvy than that. I thought that's one of the strengths that he's got. That if you get his CV out, that's what I thought would be pretty high on that list of good things he'd be able to sell as a manager, was his sort of straight bat. He seems to be very, calm, cool, quite collective when he's talking to the media after games as well. When you start seeing a difference of a manager of any sort of style, you start thinking the writing looks like it's on the wall here a little bit. For Sean Dyche to do it, I think it's a little bit more significant, because that's one thing he has been good at. That's one thing I wouldn't see anything to criticise him about, was being how he's approached, openly talking about what's going on at the club, players, media. He's not somebody you could go there and ask a pretty difficult question and he'll give you a complicated answer, at which anyone from the newspaper is going to write down and say such and such looks like he's about to leave Everton. He's not that kind of fella. That should 99.9%, in fact all of the time, work to his advantage. From what you said that he has said, that to me looks very, very desperate in many ways. That was the first thing I wanted to refer to you on there, what you said about him. So that's an example of where he is. Because lest we forget, this is a guy who got sacked by Burnley midway through a season when we were fighting against them, ironically. So he's not exactly somewhere that's unknown to him. Yes, he's known as a Allardyce type of manager who's come in to put fires out, that reference again. But beyond that, I can't remember any of those. Him, Allardyce, that kind of manager, they've been stereotyped into what they do, but they've been good at it. Let's make no mistake here. Sam Allardyce made his career as a manager by keeping sides up. Sean Dyche has done the very same for the large part of a decade at Burnley. He's kept them in the Premier League for 2-3 seasons at a time. There's a reason why they end up at Everton, because Everton have a crisis situation. Yeah, exactly. That's why that kind of manager is coming in. The chat I had with Les was really interesting last week. If people haven't listened to it, thinking that when you've had a couple of seasons where he's kept Everton in the Premier League, that this saying I was doing my head in, credit in the bank, credit in the bank. He's got
Yeah,
credit in the bank.
yeah.
That's okay. Well, if he's got credit in the bank to keep Everton in the Premier League, yeah, fine, okay. But for all of us, the question I put out to all our fans is what is the end goal for us with him? Because if that is this season's priority is to keep in the league, I'm pretty sure we all agree with that. If you're questioning Sean Dyche, you're questioning that Everton aren't able, or you aren't confident, or they have a risk of not staying in this league. And from the replies we've seen today, what everybody started saying in the first 4 games that we've had, he's not the man for this. That's a big indication to me that he's not the man that keeps us in the Premier League, let alone somebody who gets us a little bit more positive and into a comfortable place in the Premier League. Because we don't care. You get to, I don't know, if you got us to March, you got us to April, and we've guaranteed going to Bramley Moore, I'd be cock a hoop me. I'd be saying, yes, Sean, there's another 3-year contract.
I said that before the start of the season. I said that before the ball had been kicked. Get us to March, April with being a Premier League club, guaranteed for the season after. I'd bite your hand off for that. Yeah.
Yeah, just get us there.
But to your point, Dave,
before you reply to that, therein lies the problem for me, because we're happy to put, well, I am certainly, and I think I've got many people who would agree with me, we're happy to keep Sean Dyche on as long as you have the full confidence over him to keep us in that Premier League, to get to Bramley Moore. In many ways, I think that's fortunate for him, because you have 3 years of the club fighting relegation, and yes, there's a lot going on in the background. Yes, in terms of the squad, this is probably the best looking squad we've had for quite some time. We actually signed some players. He still needs to improve something. There's got to be something that you watch there that looks a little bit better. Sean, are you just going back to the well there, Sean, and saying we're going to play today and people are fuming, only 20% possession against Southampton's B team? You're getting to a situation with I was going to say Shawn Michaels then, with Sean Dyche. And start watching the wrestling in a minute. With Sean Dyche, the Premier League will find you out. That is something
I've heard, yeah.
I think you heard me say that a couple of times. The Premier League doesn't suffer fools, and you can't just go back to what you repeat and repeat and repeat. You've got some new lads in there. Irabuna, like we said, breath of fresh air since he came in, and Dai looks like a bag of tricks. He'll be able to do a lot for us. Him, Lindstrom, I think, struggled when I've seen him, but we haven't really seen too much out of him. You've got O'Brien there, who you've brought in, which is, a lot of people said, is Brantwaite 2.0. We've got some players in there that you want to see, the kind of players that we go to Goodison wanting to see, because they're new signings that we haven't really had any of for the past 3 seasons because of the shitty financial situation. And going back to what you said about Dyche, I think there's some easy wins there for him, really easy wins for him. And what he's thought tonight, and forgive me if you think I'm really, really way out of line saying this with him, but when he put Ashley Young on for Beto, and that meant that he put Ndiaye up front, that to me is something that he's thought of, and I wouldn't blame him if it is the case. I'm going to put this player on who look really excited fans, been our best signing that we've seen so far, along with Irabunum, and see him play at number 9. How good could this be? He could be the one that sort of, gets us through the door, gets us into a situation where people are thinking, wow, Sean, you've actually made a really good decision there. But in doing that, he's actually doubled how poor this has been by putting Ashley Young on for a striker. I think it's baffling, and that is why I think we've gone a long way round in saying this. That is why I've had enough of him, and I think that Everton needs to look elsewhere. Where that may be, who that may be, who gets rid of him, they're all different questions, which I'm sure we'll go over on multiple different shows. But for right now, Everton needs someone different, because you have a start to the season like that, you're going away to a side where it's a 6-pointer, immediately a 6-pointer 5 games in. You're looking at staring down the throat at the end of September, where You've lost half a dozen games. Your first 6 games, if we didn't get anything out of Palace at the end of the month, you're out of the cup game where we'd all love having a cup. When, like you said at the start, a cup at Goodison last season at Goodison, how fitting would that be? It's just been, it's gone to shreds. Stuff that we're all maybe sentimentally wanting at Goodison. It's increasingly getting hit more, and we're getting battered again, and battered again. If he goes, what's the scenario looking at for you? If he was, a lot of people said to me, I said if he loses to Leicester, then I'm pretty sure he goes. People are saying do it now, do it before we've even gone down to Leicester. Go and get a new manager. Where are you at with this now yourself?
Well, just before I answer that, with regards to the sub, I mean, Beto was dreadful tonight. So I didn't disagree necessarily with the sub. It just looks bad, doesn't it, when you bring an Ashley Young on for somebody when and look, for all the negativity I've said about him, especially after the last 2 games, he didn't have a lot to work with tonight on the bench. He didn't probably have a lot of options. He's probably, like you said there, I think that's probably a really logical explanation there. I'll try this Ndiaye lad through the middle just to see if, like, a spark, like he's a bit higher up the field. He's through the middle.
Is that desperate for you, or what? Is that you thinking that?
No, I don't think it was desperation. I think it was more necessity tonight rather than a desperation on tonight's basis and on tonight's team selection with regards to the bench he had. With what you just said about where do we go from here, like there's 2 issues here. The number one issue is if you like you said, if you get rid of him, who'd you get? And there's one glaringly obvious person who is going to be, rightly or wrongly, and you know what I'm going to say, don't you? But rightly or wrongly,
he's doing podcasts and everything now, hasn't he, as well?
He's going to be, for those of you who haven't clocked yet, I'm talking about David Moyes. But this is Everton in a nutshell. Now, the idea of Moyes coming back to me isn't necessarily the worst one, but it's not even like a nice one either, because this is Everton in a nutshell in that, looking backwards. I know Romelu Lukaku did brilliant for us, but when there was talk about him leaving Chelsea, and he's gone to Roma now, hasn't he? People were like, I'd have him back tomorrow. We're just such a club who look backwards constantly, and it's again, I'm sounding like I'm digging fans out here. I'm not, but it's become that miserable and that desperate that we aim and we look towards what kind of went well in the past. Lampard gets sacked. We need a Moyes-like figure, so we go and get Sean Dyche, and then Sean Dyche is now, struggling, and we're going, we need someone with a bit more progressive style and a younger. Well, we did that with Lampard, and that didn't work out. And that's not anyone's fault. That's the fault of the way the club's been run for the last 10 years. We haven't had a forward-thinking plan, and we just go from manager to manager with different styles each time. And we can't ever get anything going. And when it does go wrong, you're left with players who have been signed and bought to fit in with the style of that current manager. So you're back to square one again, and you're scrapping to survive, and then you survive, and then you have a bad start, and then you've got to go and get someone else in who's a different style to what we're seeing now. It's a cycle. I saw someone today, or just after the match, just put a cycle of misery, and that's what it feels like. And I don't know the answer to it, Dave. I think I've gone on record on this show of saying many a time that over 38 games he keeps you up. And if I put my hand on my heart now, I'm not saying it's going to be a nice ride and an easy run, but I think he probably does keep you up after 38 games. It might be scrapping on the last. Yeah, it might be scrapping on the last day of the season. It might be doing what we did last season and pulling a run out of somewhere and ending up finishing 15th, 16th and being comfortable with 2 games to go. But I do think he keeps it up. I think nothing will be decided, Dave, until this ownership situation sorted. And more than what Dyche is annoying me at the minute, this is really bugging me, because this is dragging on and on. I know these things take time. I know it's not as simple as X comes in with an offer and Y decides to sell. I appreciate the world of business and the world of accounts and all that is a lot more complex than even I can comprehend. But how many times now over the last 2-3 years are we being told, just wait, just hold on, and then we get let down. And then in terms of a takeover, I mean, and then this American fella at the minute texts us here, there, and everywhere, throwing comments out, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm not sure about him. And then we hear about Freak and once his interest is reignited again, and it can't be good for the manager, and it can't be good for the players. And I think possibly, not to defend him, but I think possibly in his comments and in the way he is, and how he's being a little bit, he made that famous comment on the BBC Sound series when he said, when I was at Burnley for 10 years or whatever it was, I could have wrote one book. I've been at Everton for 6 months, I could have wrote 3. And I think us as a club he might just be looking at it going, this is a mess. Like, you're expecting me to perform miracles here, and this is a mess. Like, and then maybe he's thinking, when the new owners come in or when we're at the new ground, I'm not going to be here anyway. But then the other thing with him is as well, I don't believe if we left us tomorrow, he's not going to ever manage a better club than Everton, because he's proven he can't do it with us. He'll be a lower end Premier League club again, or like a Southampton type who are in higher end of the Championship. He'll never manage a better or bigger club than Everton. He won't manage. Could you see him say, like, I don't know, Newcastle sacked Eddie Howe? Could you see them going for Dice? Not a chance.
No,
could you see Brighton going for him? No way.
Exactly. You're looking at a side like McKenna does at Ipswich, in terms of he go to a club, you get a manager, he'd probably go back to Burnley. You get a manager's job that's in the Championship, who are able to go and they get promoted via the playoffs, so they just simply get promoted into the Premier League. That's how he gets back into it. And that's why I think right now this is one of the worst situations we've been for some time. And look, I know people will say that based on the Lampard run of results, the 1 in 14, the Dice one last season, what was it, 1 in 15? Now we're talking about 5 wins in 27 games. Each time, I just think you're subliminally just walking into the shit. More and more of it again keeps happening. And look, each of us, each Evertonian, to each fan that goes the game, each fan that doesn't, each blue that there are in the world, will have their own take on how we should go and do this and try and get out of a mess that's come about in mid-September. Lest we forget, mid-September, where there's also been a fortnight break for international football, and we're sitting here talking that you could pull this off right now and put it on to May, what we're talking about right now. And
yeah, well, we'll have numerous discussions throughout the weeks, won't we, on the various shows?
Yeah, and that's it. And like, it's no promotion for our shows at all, is it? But it's what Everton is. It's what Everton are. It's what Everton tragically will be if this continues. If he continues, that's got to be. I have to say that the response that I put out there, on our Blue Room account and on my own as well, the replies we got there, I have to say, and not hyperbole to say this, but that is the most dreadful list of replies that I've seen for an Everton manager, and that includes Lampard, that includes Benitez, the ones that have been really people would consider worse than Sean Dyche. I think the style in which he sets up as well is never ever going to do him any favours whatsoever. It only does him favours if it picks us up. Obviously, it's the obvious thing to say. If it picks us up 3 points, people are like, all right, that's fine. They'll tolerate it. But it's a fine line between that. If you don't get those 3 points and you've played like that, people won't suffer for it. People won't. And I go back to that.
That's the way it's heading, isn't it? That's the way it's heading with that. And people are losing patience. Yeah.
You go into Leicester, mate. I tell you what, if we don't win at Leicester, I'll put my house on him being gone if we lose against Leicester. Or should
I don't know. I don't know, because I don't know if there's even a functioning board upstairs who gets to make that decision, especially if there's an impending takeover.
There's got to be somebody.
If there's a takeover about to happen and they've got their own ideas, from a business point of view, I'm talking now, not from what goes on the pitch, from a business point of view, I can see them being like, don't make any decisions until we're in the hot seat. That'd be my guess. But again, this just goes back to the mess that we're in, Dave. Like, it just doesn't seem. it just doesn't. There doesn't seem a way out now. Leicester's massive, and I do agree with you that if we don't get at least a point from a fan point of view, I think the pressure's going to be in the vitriol against them is just going to go into the stratosphere. I think it is going to be dangerous, and Palace at home is going to be horrible. You know,
yeah.
I think the only thing we can do, like what we say, we seem to be saying this every year now, but the only thing we can do is as fans do what we do best, and they have to rely on us again. And I think we're all getting a bit frustrated with that now because we know we'll provide the support whatever happens, but we want a bit of substance to that. And I think we've just all had enough, haven't we? We've been saying this for years.
They don't deserve it. Do you know what I mean?
And that's why probably as well that you get the reactions. You get the reactions you do, Dave, in this instance, whereby if it was, you know, I talked about Southampton earlier. Southampton have just come off the back of a playoff win at Wembley. So their fans are probably still, even though they've not done well at the start of the season, their fans are probably still in a bit of a high. The fact that we've suffered for so long now, it's probably like, I mean, patience is wore thin anyway, but it's that bit thinner when we go on a run like we do now, because we're just like, really, again, it's happening again. When's it going to be our turn to have like something decent happen? And it just feels like never, which is the sad thing, which is the really upsetting thing. And we keep pointing towards this new ground as the hope and the glory and the catalyst for us turning around as a football club, but it just seems a million miles away. Even though it's next season, it seems a million miles away to even get to that point. And you know, tonight's game again just symbolises. It's one of those games tonight that symbolises us as a football club at the minute. And we will. We'll win games this season, and we'll have good performances. You always have a spell, and we might just be all right, but there's a bigger issue at play, and we haven't addressed that issue, and that is that we haven't addressed the issues of ownership. We haven't addressed the issues of style, recruitment, everything you name to be a good football club in the Premier League. We haven't addressed for years, and that is where all this stems from. Whenever we have these conversations, what seems to be every single year, it all stems from that. And until there is significant change at the top, the bottom down isn't going to get any better anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to get a
what a way to end, eh, Dave?
Oh no, I was going to say, sticking even further into the doldrums, I'm thinking, can you imagine it's like this at Bramley-Moore? We're watching these games at Bramley-Moore.
I know.
Bramley-Moore in a year's time.
I know.
It's unthinkable, but certainly something that could happen, isn't it? The way we are at the moment. But anyway, we'll leave it there. Hopefully, it's given people a little bit of perspective of how most others are thinking about this. Do let us know your thoughts as you always do. We're always on YouTube as well. Bagfuls of stuff coming up again, as we always have every single week. Me and Les, I'll be getting Les Roberts' take on all of this tomorrow. That'll be Wednesday to everyone who's listening. We normally have Blue Monday, it's Blue Wednesday this week, given we had the midweek game. We've already got Byline out with Paddy and Matt, which is a brilliant listen if you haven't to already. That came out early this morning. And then we'll go back to Mailbag, which seems to be the promised land for all of us, doesn't it, Warren? When you're in, when any of us are in there, it seems to be, at least I can smile about Everton because they've asked me something.
At least I can put my feet up and have a laugh, yeah.
That's it, mate. That's it. Don't have to think fully about the club until the next day when the game's on anyway. But then all roads head towards Leicester at the weekend, which is going to be interesting. So we'll speak to you then. And let's hope up the Toffees.